Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting. I know we've had a couple of councillors late arriving. First of all, obviously this is my first committee meeting as chairman. I do welcome you all to this beautiful part of Derbyshire. I shall do the job to the best of my ability. Can I just say to councillors, we need to look at this holistically on this transport committee as an all area. Right, I know we've all got those areas that we look after individually, which you will be able to articulate today, and I shan't stop anybody doing that. But if we can also keep this transport as the bigger picture moving forward of the old area of Notts and Derbyshire, if that's all right. So moving on, apologies for absence. I've got apologies from Councillor Dinser, substituted by Councillor Bolton. Apologies from Councillor Wood, substituted by Councillor Cliff, and I've also got apologies from Councillor Flitter. Are there any other apologies? No? Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Cliff.
It's obviously with Derbyshire County Council we are a constitute authority, and we do have a vested interest in the transport transition proposals.
Sorry, I didn't know it had gone off. I do apologise. Public participation. We have 17 questions today. We are going to be taking some questions for the people that has actually got here. Obviously, we won't have time to take all 17. So I'm going to start from the top for the people that has confirmed their attendance today, and we'll go on from there because some people haven't attended, if that's all right with everybody. So the first one, if we can ask Ian Clark to come up and put his question, please. Yeah, please, and use a microphone if that's all right. To remind everybody, today's meeting is being recorded and filmed.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm a member of Rail Future East Midlands, and we are concerned with bus rail coordination. Because it's a complete void, the Peak District. So in addition to the points that I've already made about rescheduling the Trans-Peak bus service, I believe there's also a capacity issue at peak times because there are only single-decker buses on the route. Whereas if you look at the 170 bus now between Chesterfield and Bakewell run by Stagecoach, they have upgraded their route to new electric double-deckers, and they can cope with peak demands without people having to stand. But the other point I have is that the coordination is not just at one end at Matlock, there is also the coordination here, and that is with Northern Rail. And I believe there are issues at Northern Rail in that the pre-COVID service has not been reinstated, so you haven't got half-hourly service in the off-peak. And if it's anything like the situation in Nottingham, between Nottingham and Mansfield Woodhouse, I estimate they're losing 320,000 a year footfall because they're only running an hourly instead of half-hourly service. So there are just various points that I'd like the authority to consider. It's rail related and bus related, but if you could get Bakewell as a intermediate point on the National Rail database, like East Midlands Airport, Pickering in the North York Moors, Keswick in the Lake District, you would get the bus departures on the rail screens, and you would get through journeys from all points of the country. At Bakewell, you could be getting it from Chesterfield Midland on the 170, and you could be getting it from here or from Matlock, and you could get people from Manchester travelling to Matlock indicated on a through journey. You might, through fares would be even better, but that's obviously another step, but that's basically what we're asking the authorities to consider.
Thank you. Can I ask Mayor Clare to respond, please? Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question, and just to ensure that people have got a broader sense of the range of issues that you have raised in relation to Matlock, to other parts of our region, a recognition that there is some work being done on integration. Obviously, I don't have responsibility for those broader national rail services or the database that uses those. But my ambition is to see a region where we have much greater levels of integration between our rail and our bus services. I will certainly be asking officers to look at some of those things to see how we may be able to influence in discussions. But I would, as I will no doubt be saying in answer to many other questions this morning, remind people that we will be having a mayor's transport plan. There will be a consultation, and I will expect that many people will raise the issues of the importance of integration of rail, bus and other forms of transport across the region.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and thank you, Mayor Clare. The next person I have on my list that's in attendance is Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, Mayor Clare, to my question. And I'd like to start my supplementary question by extending an invitation to you to travel with me and other bus users on the 61 bus as part of a face-to-face public consultation. This bus, and I have leaflets here that we've made, this bus runs along the spine of the High Peak from Glossop to Buxton, connecting the picturesque towns and villages which lie on its route. It takes people to work in retail, hospitality, and to big employers like Swizzles and Tesco superstores, all involving shift work. Local people will also travel to schools, medical appointments, leisure and cultural venues, and to friends and family. It brings visitors to the High Peak on one of the most dramatic and scenic bus routes, we think, in the whole of Derbyshire, past Bleaklow, Kinder Scout, the Tors, and through the Goyt Valley. And yet, the last bus leaves Buxton at 5 p.m, and there's no service on a Sunday. The operators, High Peak Buses, have made some improvements to the service, and figures from Derbyshire County Council show that after this, bus usage went up by 25%. It seems it is a service worth investing in. Our communities lie at the northernmost point of the East Midlands and are the furthest away from its administrative centre. How and who will assess how the bus revenue funding for EMCCA will be used for the High Peak?
Mayor Clare.
Thank you very much. So first of all, just to reiterate from your original point in your substantive question about how the money that we've been allocated on the £2 billion Transport for City Region funding, and how that will be primarily a capital fund rather than a revenue. We will have some revenue that we would expect to maintain additional revenue grant funding to support bus services, as we have done in this year, and to continue to discuss with government the expectation of further funding for 26 and 27. You raised some really important points about the connectivity of our small towns and communities, not just in the High Peak, but indeed right across our region. And it's the nature of this region, which means that the solutions that we must have must be East Midlands built, design and focused. And lift and shift models from other regions simply won't work in this one. That's why the Mayor's Transport Plan is so important, and it's so important that we get the views of people about where they live, where they need to get to, whether it be work or play or in seeing family, or essential services, or simply enjoying the beauty of this region, as you've just described in the number 61 bus. I'm very happy that we should have a range of different options in the way in which we engage when it comes to the consultation, and I'll certainly take up your idea of being an active engagement and getting on the bus and talking to users. I've done it in the past, certainly during my campaign to become the mayor. I talked to bus users as I got on the bus to understand some of those challenges, particularly in North East Derbyshire, and I'm very happy to do the same as part of our consultation here in the High Peak.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you on the bus.
Thank you. I have Anne Robinson, who's confirmed to speak. Thank you. Excuse me, sorry, could you just switch the microphone on? Sorry. You switch the microphone on.
Hello. Sorry. Sorry, do you want me to start again? Okay, well, many thanks for the answer to your question. However, I'm not that over-reassured because the EMCCA's single assurance framework does not refer to wider environmental or social assessments. There is reference only to meeting legal requirements, and it relies on DFT standard appraisal and benefit cost ratio, which we all know are heavily flawed. It also relies on the Treasury Green Book, which subsumes social and environmental value into the strategic and economic cases. Furthermore, it appears that schemes are being shortlisted before the LTP is in place when we read the papers that are coming to the committee, and with no apparent input or consultation with the public, which questions the transparency and accountability of the process. By contrast, the single assurance framework that South Yorkshire Mayor uses to test transport funding applications has outcomes for growth and employment, flooding, carbon emissions, modal shift, all with targets set to 2040. And then there are supporting indicators which include bus patronage, bus time, bus reliability, bus satisfaction, ecosystem services, commuting mode of travel. So will EMCCA adopt similar outcomes and targets as those of the South Yorkshire Mayor against which to test transport investments and consult with the public on the process and its implementation?
Well, thank you very much for that. First of all, I'd say that the single assurance framework is only one part of what we will need to consider when we make decisions, both on policy for the region, but also that investment. And you're right, it's mainly the legal and transparency nature of it. What we are yet to see is the report of the Inclusive Growth Commission and our local growth plan, together with the Mayor's transport plan, and all of those will help to shape the way in which we wish to see investment put into this region. And I've always been very clear that to do so, we need to look through a series of lenses, and those lenses include environmental challenges. They also include that social mobility and opportunity, and very much the reports that we'll see and the outcomes that we will see in the Inclusive Growth Commission. So what we've got at the moment is only part of the story. And I hope as we complete our overall governance and framework for making investments and policy decisions, you will see that there's much more to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Stephen Shato, if he wants to come up to the...
Good morning, Mayor, councillors, officers. I think that's pretty much everybody. Thank you to the Mayor for her response to my questions about support for Belper and additional stops by Midland Main Line services, which the town council has taken up most enthusiastically. We're going through a process there which will result in a survey being hosted on the town council's website to provide more information for EMR, with whom I have a meeting tomorrow. So this is taking up proposals, reminders that were in your answer. Also, in respect of Clay Cross, my colleagues and I are not entirely sure that the pre-study which was made available to the initial Network Rail study was taken up and incorporated. And that's kind of the supplementary question for this group. If the campaigners within Friends of the Derwent Valley Line and Rail Future are able to do work of this sort, whether it offers the prospect of a model which might complement the sort of recommendations and work which we're confident will be outlined in the local transport plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Clare.
Thank you very much for that. And clearly a lot of this is working through with our officers, and I'm sure that the points that you've raised in supplement to your main question, particularly around the potential for Clay Cross, will be picked up by officers and reviewed.
Thank you.
I have got Jim Froggatt next on my list, who's confirmed his attendance. Thank you.
Good morning. I started my original question by mentioning the Great Gathering. So I would like to start by saying I think the committee should acknowledge that if everybody across the East Midlands works together, they can produce a great success. And everybody I've spoken to, although I didn't have a ticket, said how well it was run. What did strike people at the event was that it was ridiculous that Alstom at Derby are building electric trains. They could have a ride on an electric train on the test site, but they can't move off the site because there aren't any more wires until you get down to the south of that side of Leicester. In fact, when I had to think about it, I noticed, and this is a point, that there was more electric railway in Derbyshire in 1955 than there is now. The people at this end of the county were probably aware that the line over from Glossop over Woodhead to Sheffield was electrified then and has since been closed completely, which doesn't say much for national politicians' transport strategy over the last 70 years. I'm very pleased to hear that you are going to meet Lord Hendy. That's one point I would like you to make. The other one I would think would be that the fact that we are probably in Derbyshire the only county which has less electric railway than it did 70 years ago. The other point is that Middle and Main Line will still be using diesel trains and the way we're going at the moment, long after the government has banned new petrol and diesel cars. So all the pollution in Derby and along the line will be caused by the railway and not by the roads, which is a ridiculous situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get to the Great Gathering either, but like you, I've heard a very positive comments from people who did, and I think it talks to the proud heritage of Derby and surrounding areas in this area. And I want it not just to be something that we look back with nostalgia on as a city, but recognise the great future that Derby has as the centre of railway, both with the planned location of Great British Rail headquarters into Derby, but also the continued support of Alstom for train manufacture. And it really is, I think, with the rail campus as well, potential to bring more jobs into the region and to cement that expertise of the railway industry within Derby and surrounding areas. In relation to the Midland Main Line electrification, I share your disappointment that we haven't seen some progress on that. Of course, I'm very pleased with the other parts of the settlement that we got from the Secretary of State in the spending review. Given that we are a new region, a new authority, and as you already know, one that doesn't actually have its mayor's transport plan in place yet, to get the highest level of investment of £2 billion really tells us something about how we are viewed in this region and the potential that we have, and I'll continue to make the case for even more. But I am disappointed that we haven't seen some more progress on Midland Main Line electrification, and I will continue to press the case with ministers and with the Secretary of State. I think it's important not just for the railway industry, it's important for the supply of jobs in that supply chain, but it's also important for the environmental reasons that you've talked about. And I will, as I say, continue to make that case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you Lisa? Sorry, I didn't have you down as confirmed. It's all right. Would you like to come up now? Yeah, of course it is. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So my question was about a vision-led approach to development, because I'm very concerned that any transport funding that EMCCA uses to support development in the region ensures that it's based around sustainable travel and not proliferation of more car-dependent development. And thank you very much, Mayor Clare, for your response. Very much looking forward to seeing the various draft plans, and very pleased you're exploring a vision and validate approach. However, there are so few examples in the region. I can only think of one, which is truly a vision-led development that even attempts to be based around sustainable transport. And most of the current large developments I've seen around the region appear to be based on the same old car-dependent models. And even in developments which are supposed to be served by buses, we see many examples where the bus services don't start until 1 or 2 years after the first houses are occupied. And to follow up a previous response you gave, I am also concerned that your programme to shortlist transport schemes, which is very quick, I think October was the shortlist, and you're going to approve them in January. That's before the local transport plan, which is not until autumn next year. So I realise that EMCCA are not the planning authority, but you do have a lot of money to support transport schemes, to support development in the region. What mechanism will you use to ensure that any development which requires funding support for transport access is located around major public transport hubs or has sustainable transport infrastructure at its core rather than the usual car-dependent development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to see a region that both recognises where we are in terms of the geography of this region and the challenges we have, but also thinks differently about what we could do in the future. And that's the great opportunity that we have, both as looking at the spatial planning of where houses might be, where jobs might be in the future, and what the transport options could be. And we will continue to explore all of those things. I'll state again that the forthcoming Inclusive Growth Commission and the Local Growth Plan that will come out over the next 2 months, Inclusive Growth Commission will be published next week and the Local Growth Plan in October, should give us more hope, and I hope residents more hope, that we will look at things differently when we are planning where transport options could be and how we can move people around this region sustainably and also in a more innovative way at times.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you. I have Simon Horner next on the list. Thank you.
I'm going to read this because I'm here. Is this on? Yeah. I'm here representing a group of residents in Gotham and Gotham Parish Council. How many of you know Gotham? Very few, very few. You really should come and see the village. It's very nice. Thank you for the answer to the question, Mayor. Given you only started consultation on the transport plan in the autumn, what's the realistic time frame for an early allocation of part of the £2 billion funding to accelerate implementation of the schemes already in the constituent authorities' LC whips, especially where a route has become more dangerous due to other works, which is our case between Gotham and Clifton? You said you put us in touch with, through your officers. That would be great. We tried all summer to get in touch with your officers with emails, but got no response. And finally, another challenge for you. Given you're creating a circular East Midlands walking route and have apparently made it to Cresswell Crags, so the press say, we challenge you to include Gotham in the route as you head back to the Derwent. The Gotham Neighbourhood Plan notes that Gotham is one of the best connected South Notts villages in terms of public rights of way, with off-road connections to all of the surrounding villages. Of course, you'll need a safe route from Clifton to Gotham to be able to do this, so it'd be in your interest to take that challenge on and get your skates on with the funding.
Thank you very much, and I'll ask officers to respond in a moment on the first point. I'll just say that in relation to the active travel route, the loop that I am creating that and bringing to life the concept of this, which will connect the region to itself and provide an opportunity, particularly for visitor economy. The route has been mapped out at the moment. It's 154 miles around the region, and I recognise that I won't get to every bit of this region, and I've already had several requests from particularly places in the middle of the region as to why I'm not touching those. I can assure you that I think I've now reached earlier this week Clumber Park, and we'll continue on the route from there. But I'm happy to...
Well, even as you're going round, you might take a little detour.
Well, I may take one or two detours, but I'm happy, as I've told other people, to look at further requests for separate visits to places that are important to showcase and to understand as we think about getting around our region.
Thank you, Mayor Clare. Can I ask Alex to come in on the first bit, please? Thank you.
With regards to the question about acceleration of funding for new schemes, and in reflection to some of the comments being made earlier on around the apparent timing mismatch between an investment plan and the LTP, the investment planning that we'll be doing over the course of the rest of this year will open up the opportunity for deliverable schemes to be picked up and for us to start working on those with an ambition that that programme will start in April next year. What we won't be doing is looking to allocate the full 6 years allocation in full.
Yeah.
We do need to recognise the fact that the LTP will be developing at the same time, and so we'll need to keep checking back in and referencing back to that LTP as it grows. But in the investment programme paper, which we'll come to later on, we'll talk about the fact that we'll be opening up the opportunity for deliverable schemes to be put forward across this autumn for funding from next year.
And by deliverable schemes, you mean schemes that have already been planned out? Or do you mean ones that are in the, for instance, in the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan for Nottingham County Council, medium term, which is where ours is?
It could be either. We're not just looking at a year's worth of investment programme. You know, we have got an opportunity with the longevity of funding that we've got to plan a bit further ahead. There'll be some schemes where we may look 2 or 3 years in advance, some things where we only look at shorter term, but essentially what we'll be doing across the autumn is open up the opportunity for all schemes that are in a position to start delivering soon and assessing those. So it won't just be, can you put the first shovel in the ground on the 1st of April? If there are things that are well developed but a little bit further down the line before implementation comes, they would still be eligible for consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've got Nigel Lee next. Well, next on my list is Jeremy White.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your positive response to my question about our Switzerland in the Peak District project in the Hope Valley. Just one quick supplementary question. You said you look forward to taking forward any ideas that come out of it. Would that include brokering discussions with the mayors in South Yorkshire and Greater Manchester? Because, as you know, Hope Valley is very much in between, within this region, but in between two others, and that's critical for our rail line and connectivity.
Thank you for your question. You may be aware that in Buxton just last month, I was trying to think where I am at the time, here in this venue last month, I held a meeting of the other two mayors, Mayor Burnham from Greater Manchester and Mayor Coppard from South Yorkshire, to focus on a peak partnership, which is a recognition that the three regions have a lot in common when it comes to the Peak District, both for our residents travelling between those three regions, but also the importance of that travel connection. And one of the first agreements that we've had was to ask our sustainable travel or active travel ambassadors to meet at the earliest possible opportunity to look at some of those transport challenges. And as you rightly describe, Hope Valley is clearly, with its line and the level of services that are on that at the moment, one of those areas of particular interest. I do think you have already been meeting with my Sustainable Travel Ambassador.
Yes.
And I'm sure that he will have picked up the issues that you've raised with him.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have 1 minute, I've just been told, on questions. Mayor Clare, are we all right to take the last question? Is it? I've got Darren Widdowson here.
Right.
Sorry, David, I do apologise. Hello all. I'm also a member of the National Pensioners Convention, so obviously transport's a big issue of accessibility for elderly people. But we do take lots of, in our campaigning about getting better buses, we do come across lots of people who have issues with buses. And my question, which you answered, Claire, was about people having to, from less well areas, are suddenly faced with 2 fares to get to Bakewell rather than 1. And yet richer areas can get to Bakewell with just 1 single fare. So there's inequality in the bus service. Now, you did answer, as a supplementary, you say you want to make the bus service, the buses to serve the public in the most effective way possible. So how will you ensure the voices of bus users are heard and have meaningful participation that will be an effective voice to shape the development of the bus services, please?
Thank you very much. And this, I think, goes to the core of why we want to do the consultation on the Mayor's transport plan, because we need to hear from people, both when we start that high-level conversation about what we're seeking to get from a local transport plan, but also in due course at the level of detail. And I recognise that for many people, the bus networks simply do not work across this region. And we need to have an ambitious plan to improve those, working with our bus companies and the enhanced partnerships. As you will already be aware, I haven't started from the position of a policy of franchising. I think we will start from the position of an enhanced partnership. But I do expect bus companies to come to the table with that mindset of seeking to improve the offers that are available to our residents across this region, because ultimately the tools for other actions will remain in the toolbox in any discussions.
Thank you. That's the end of the question section. Thank you, Mayor Clare, and thank you everyone for taking part. We'll now move on to item 5, overview of the role of the Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee. Can I introduce Catherine Stevens, who's going to do an overview of the role of this committee, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really good, obviously, to hear around the room the regional commitments that...
Yeah.
It is on. It is. I can try and speak a bit more loudly if that's helpful. Just saying that it's really good, obviously, to have the regional commitment to the East Midlands Combined Authority represented around this room, and I'm very conscious, we're very conscious in EMCCA offices that this may be the first EMCCA meeting that some members have attended, and so it was felt it was really helpful to perhaps run through an overview of the governance of firstly EMCCA, then the role of the committees, the role of the Transport Committee specifically, and what the Transport Committee is aiming to deliver. I have some assistance with from Mr. Linton to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the governance framework of the East Midlands Combined Authority is to deliver the operation of functions that have been devolved from government to the region. Some of those functions will be established by the operation of the board itself, and I'll talk in a moment about how the board is made up. The functions of the board need to be decisions of the board, but they can be delegated, and one of the things that has happened this year for the East Midlands Combined Authority is that there have been decisions to try and position the board as a strategic decision maker and to ensure that more of the operational decision making can be passed to committees and to make that a really meaningful role for regional representation. Alongside those combined authority board functions, the Mayor has some functions which are directly her responsibility, but she exercises those in consultation with each of the constituent authorities and through the portfolio leads. If you could go to the next slide, please. So just to explain again, the makeup of the board is that there is obviously led and chaired by the Mayor. There are 2 representatives from each of the constituent authorities. There are representatives from the districts and boroughs, and there are associate members who advise and speak to the board about things that are of relevance to the strategic planning that the board is undertaking. The role of that committee, the role of the board is fundamentally to plan the strategic vision and respond to the priorities that are evident within the East Midlands region. And to do that, they obviously need to be supported by the work of officers, but also crucially the work of members across the region. So just to explain that committee structure for the East Midlands Combined Authority, the board sits above 4 committees, of which Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee is one. The Housing and Land Committee is a new committee this year, so that will be taking place fairly shortly. That's on the 17th of September, so that will be its inaugural meeting. And beneath each of those committees, they are supported by officers, of course, but by a constituent authority representative of officer leads. And those technical officer groups will support the work of each of those committees by bringing the technical expertise to the democratic mandate that members on those committees will have. So for the next slide. To move to the role of the Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee, it is a formally constituted committee. We do have some informal committees, some advisory boards, but the Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee is a decision-making body of the combined authority. Its membership is made up of the Mayor with 8 members from the constituent authorities, 4 members of the districts and boroughs, a member of the Business Advisory Board, who's here with us today, and others as appointed by the board or the committee if it chooses to co-opt members. The collaboration that we've heard led by the chair today in his opening remarks and echoed in some of the questions that have come forward from members of the public is that this is a collaborative forum to support and inform the strategic decision-making of the board. And for all the members that come to an EMCCA committee process, the hat of elected member for your constituent authority is slightly put to one side to be able to discuss and consider the strategic transport needs of the region and the digital connectivity needs of the region. What the democratic mandate there does is enable this group to put forward a collective understanding of the key needs of the region, to put forward elements for strategy, policy and investment proposals, which will be supported by the other mechanisms of representation within the combined authority. There will be specific portfolio requirements, which the chair of our committee is the portfolio lead for transport, and his role is to coordinate and share and champion that collaborative working around the regional priorities and to ensure that those voices are heard at the board. I will go on to talk a little bit about the tour in a moment, but obviously the role of the chair, the role of the vice chair is to coordinate the many views and the many needs and thematic areas across the whole of the East Midlands region to enable EMCCA to make its decisions on an informed and well-supported strategic basis. There is a new element of decision-making that's been delegated to committees across EMCCA, and if we go to the next slide, we will see in the terms of reference that each of you should have, this is set out to say, what are we here to do as a committee? What is our remit? So, very key and important, and actually something which was already a power of this committee, is to ensure the design and approval of public consultation, which is required for the development of the local transport plan, the Mayor's transport strategy. That has to come through the democratic mandate that you have, so to bring that voice, to ensure that the right people are spoken to about the right things in the right way at the right time. So that's a key set of decision making that this committee has. It will also consider the allocation of funding, which again, absolutely vital to ensure that funding is going to the right places, that that whole balance of voices is heard in that, and that no party feels that this is a competition across a region which has very distinct, different and vital needs for the communities to be able to thrive. We also have the highway maintenance budgets that come into that, and obviously liaison with the highways authorities, which remain within the constituent authority remit, don't transfer with the other elements of transport. That liaison is going to be a really key and pivotal area where this committee can bring its ability, skills and information to ensure that that is taken into account in all decision making. And also to provide a response and guidance on any government-led initiatives where, obviously for central policies to reflect the reality of transport right across the East Midlands. It also has a vital role in the oversight of the transport transition process that we are going through. The transport transition period, you'll hear a little bit more about that and an update on that later, is in a transition period which comes to an end on the 31st of March 2026. So we're a good way through that process, and a number of you will have had some involvement with that process. And also to consider any non-financial transition agreements in collaboration with officers, and that has been delegated from board to officers because there's rapid decision making that needs to be done at this point to ensure our readiness for operational success in the transport transition, to ensure that members of the public using the transport in this region have a positive experience of that process. The work programme for this committee, which is on the next slide, is already set in part, but there clearly is a role for this committee to consider and plan what its future work programme needs to be. And again, the chair and the vice chair have a vital role to play in ensuring that the right subjects get discussed at the right time to allow proper engagement and proper planning for investment. So you'll see on there the matters that we're definitely covering in this quarter are set out. So the regional transport strategy, transport transition, transport investment and digital connectivity strategy are key pieces of work that this committee will be engaged and involved in informing and shaping for the whole East Midlands region. And finally, just to reiterate something I mentioned before on the next slide, that the committee support is going to be given by transport technical officers. So again, lead officers from each of the constituent authorities who regularly come together, regular communication with chief officers, directors and executive directors within EMCCA itself. And that communication and that centralising of that support is designed to enable this committee to make the decisions, have the information, have the plan for how you can get what you need from the organisation so that you can meet your requirements in making the decisions for transport in the East Midlands. And with that, Chair, I'll close the presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to open it up for members for questions and comments. I've got Councillor Ralph.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm one of the people who've been involved in the discussions around the creation of EMCCA from very early doors. And one of the things that has frustrated me with this committee up till this point, and seems to be cemented into the terms of reference there, is that we don't seem to be being used as a democratic decision-making body. It is entirely about noting, agreeing, monitoring. And I think that is potentially a massive missed opportunity and waste of people's times. You know, there are people around this table with significant expertise and understanding of the region. I'm keen to make sure that the terms of reference around this are about genuine decision-making. If we only ever come here with a report to either accept or refuse, I think that is a missed opportunity. And so I would love to see some of the language in that terms of reference change to be talking more about decisions rather than approving. Because as I say, that's not, I think, what we should be trying to achieve in this committee. Second question is just around, we've talked a lot around collaboration, you know, it's come up a lot, and there is a lot around EMCCA still being set up, and I understand the need to focus on what is the legislative powers that we need to fulfill. But one of the superpowers of having a mayor and having a strategic authority is about that strategic collaboration with other strategic organisations, such as the rail operators, the bus operators, National Highways, Network Rail. If this committee isn't the people who are going to be involved in that strategic partnership at those strategic levels, who is driving that forward and how will that interact with this committee? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd fully support you on both them points as Chair, to be honest, and thanks for your comments. I've got... Mellon next.
Thanks, Catherine, for that information, and thanks to four officers for providing the opportunity for that information to be given to us more individually in smaller groups over the summer period. And you covered some of the same area, and I guess because there's been so much change within a short period in the members of this committee, that's necessary. You talked about associate members and a business rep, but who are the other associate members? They're not on the minutes. I don't know if they're here today.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions? Councillor Bingham.
Yeah, excuse me. I know we're operating and happy to operate at a regional level. We're from Nottinghamshire and understand that this is a strategic opportunity. So I agree with most of the things that I've heard today coming from the Mayor. Those comments that you just made, I can second and support those. And I do think that this is a committee that can involve or should be involved in shaping and driving a shared vision going forward. And you know, if we have a debate around that, if we satisfy ourselves that we're happy that that's how it's functioning at the moment, or should function if we think it's dysfunctional, perhaps we could air that now. But I think that to draw it together on a regional level, and I like the strategic talk about spatial plans, etc., how we're going to draw that all together. And I also support what you're saying about involving, for example, the train operating companies, because I do a lot of travel on public transport myself. So very supportive of what's happening, see it as a strategic opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sean.
Thank you. I'm here today representing the Business Advisory Board. Thank you for the opportunity to attend. Just reflecting on the terms of reference and the role, it's clear that the business, obviously the business board needs to be able to give a voice to this committee. To be able to do that, it'd be really helpful if Catherine and the team could present to the business board so we can understand exactly what it's involved in and be able to feedback. In talking to the business board yesterday and understanding their initial feedback, obviously they're not fully understanding of the role of the committee, that's the first point, but they did raise a few points that I'd like to raise today, just very simple points, which are probably could be misunderstanding because of the lack of knowledge. The first point was the agenda feels to be 95% transportation and 5% digital connectivity, very little on digital connectivity. And thinking about the business board and their role in respect of the impact and enablers on employment and SMEs, things like that, digital is really a big part. I understand how transportation is a priority at the moment, but that was one of the elements of feedback. The second thing raised at the business board was that the Mayor's done a fantastic job in getting the funding that we've got, but the transport programme appears to be fixed before the Mayor's plan has been completed, which from a business perspective appears the wrong way around. So the board really was questioning, the Mayor's plan and objectives. If the objectives decide the decisions which influence the infrastructure programmes, how do we ensure the proposed schemes meet the community needs, meet the Mayor's ambitions, but also meet the business needs? So I think if we can have a representation and update for the business board and give the board a chance to comment properly, then I'll be able to give a better representation and feedback both ways on future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. If there are no other speakers, Catherine, can I ask you to come back on the councillors' points and Sean's, please? Thank you.
Certainly. I probably will defer to fellow officers for a variety of these. So just briefly, though, taking the first point, which was about the nature of decision making and the terms of reference. The terms of reference can be reviewed on an annual basis by the committee, so there is scope for that process to come into this forum. But there are further delegations to this committee this year in terms of the allocation of funding in particular, but the overall scope of that allocation is something that board will deal with initially. I think, again, just in terms of the terms of reference and how that reflects that, if I could just touch on the associate members' point as well before handing over to other officers. Currently, the Business Advisory Board is the only associate member of this group, but it is open to this committee to identify others if that is going to serve a purpose which this year's work plan would benefit from. I think that's probably where my area concludes, and I might hand over to Peter, Edward or Alex at this point.
No problem. Thank you, Catherine. Peter?
Just briefly, I'm certainly very happy to come and present and with my colleagues to the business board and set the context for that relationship and that understanding of business need in the region in the context of developing our thinking, developing the Mayor's Transport Plan. So there'll definitely be an opportunity to do that. We could potentially tie that into the forthcoming consultation on the Mayor's Transport Plan. So, yeah, very much.
Just a quick response to the point around the meeting of the Mayor's Transport Plan and the investment. It's on now, sorry. Apologies, Sean. Just in response to the question around the sequencing of the Mayor's Transport Plan and the investment programme. Obviously, the ideal scenario would be the Mayor's Transport Plan is set, that then informs the framework around which we plan the investment programme. But we also have immediate needs that need to be addressed. We have a significant amount of funding available to us, and we don't want to wait for an extended period while we do the thorough comprehensive job we need to do on the transport plan before we start investing. What we won't be doing is setting the whole programme. We are not going to commit the entire funding envelope that we've got now ahead of the Mayor's Transport Plan. What we're looking to do over this next phase of it is deal with those more immediate needs and those areas where we can start making an early difference, whilst leaving us with the capacity to respond to the Mayor's Transport Plan as it evolves, as we go through the consultation and continue to plan the investments beyond that period.
Thank you. Councillor Rolfe.
Yeah, just following up on my point around the strategic and who's picking that up, and also around the point of saying we've got 3 spare seats on this. Do we want to fill those 3 spare seats with a bus, rail and road representative?
Just in response to that, I have had conversations with the Managing Director of EMR, for example, and bus operators within the region about how they might engage better with members and the committee. And they're very keen to do so. I'm not sure, though, and I'd need to take advice from colleagues, whether it would be appropriate for them to be on the committee itself, rather invited by the committee to come and talk to the committee and present their current thinking and so on, and have a Q&A type arrangement. That probably would be a better bet, but we can discuss this offline. But certainly a stronger engagement with both the bus and rail sectors, I think, would be a real benefit to this committee. So I'm happy to take that away and support that principle.
Councillor Mellon.
I just haven't answered my question about the associate members.
Sorry, I thought I answered that at the beginning, in that the Business Advisory Board is the only associate member currently. It is potentially open to the board, to the committee, to identify additional associate members. And if that is something this committee wishes to pursue, it can certainly be something that we investigate and consider. So again, Chair, I bow to you in terms of how you'd like to take that forward, but we can certainly make that an informal consultation process and via officers to understand what the requirements there might be.
All I would say is that those of us who were involved in setting up this committee in the first place agreed that a long time ago, and for us still 15 to 18 months into the process to be not decided on that, it seems to just be a bit of a haltering start.
Has any other members got any comments on that? Mayor?
Could I have some? Could we have some suggestions as to who else you would like to have as associate members? Because unless there are suggestions coming through, I'm not necessarily sure it's just for officers to propose that. I think a discussion amongst the membership would be good.
Thank you. Councillor Bingham.
Well, we're not represented on that board, and I'd be happy to sit on it as an associate member.
I don't think...
Are you looking for external?
We're looking for external. Just to be clear, obviously, we're already members, so we're looking for external.
Bus, rail, yeah.
And I think Councillor Rolfe alluded to it earlier, but obviously I think we need to pick this up away from this meeting and see if we can get anybody else sat on there. Sorry, Councillor Mellon.
If you want suggestions, I think Matthew made some suggestions from the operators. I think there are passenger bodies that could sit here. There are members of trade unions, people who work on our railways and our buses who could be, there's a load of people that we could have here that would be helpful. Councillors are knowledgeable about their communities, but we don't know everything, so actually having other people who could input into this discussion, I think, would be beneficial.
Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. I think in that case, may I make the suggestion that we do that on a basis where the officers take your suggestions to bring a paper to a future committee as to how you'd like to proceed with that, because I think that will probably answer the point.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Ralph.
Thanks, Chair. Just as some possible suggestions, there's a Bus Users UK who act as sort of an advisory and sort of a complaint resolution body for bus users. I think that would probably make a sensible suggestion to sort of add on to the list. In terms of the rail operator, I'd probably be a little bit torn, whilst I realise for many members in the room, East Midlands Rail would probably be the preferred body. For those of us up this end, for us it's obviously Northern Rail, so I think we'd probably want a bit of flexibility around that, I think, depending on what the committee's sort of considering at that particular point in time as to which of the bodies is most appropriate, depending on that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Ralph.
Yeah, can I just make a suggestion? Because I think there are probably far more people who we would like to be involved than there are seats for. And let's not ignore active travel in all of this as well. Would it be worth considering actually convening some sort of practitioners, operators subcommittee that involves train operators, rail operators, bus operators, network rail, national highways, active travel groups, all of those sorts of people to come together and maybe have nominated from that board 2 or 3 representatives that then bring up and bubble up those issues that are raised and discussed at that level. I'm just keen to make sure that while we are trying to encourage collaboration, we can't do it in isolation. We need to bring these people together and get them all around the table chatting, whether that's right in this room or whether that's in a subgroup room. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Ralph. I'd actually wrote subcommittee down, so I think that's a good idea. Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's an interesting discussion. I think all the things that have been said is true. We do need to get the right people around the table. I suppose my point I will make is that we're discussing this now as a transport committee, as we are, and it could be this transport committee will carry on as it is for the next year and maybe change slightly over time. But certainly by the end of this year, we will be sure about where the emerging unitary authority areas are going to be. The local transport plan is due to be go through the process and come out of a process late 2026. Already for a year, in fact, therefore, those unitary authority areas that we will know come the new year will be working on those strategic elements around what they want for those unitary authority areas. And I'm just wondering how this committee will adapt to those emerging unitary authority areas and, of course, all the planning that those authorities in those areas will be making during that time as we run into the local transport plan. And, of course, the local transport plan is then going to be a local transport plan for a number of years after it as well, which will incorporate the unitary authorities when they come into being in 2028. So I suppose it's just not a shot across the bars, but just we need to acknowledge that there's changes within local government, and those changes will impact this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Chair. In terms of the wider strategic partnership engagement, obviously there's a huge amount of work that's going into local government reform that's going on now, and a huge number of partners which are engaged in exactly that kind of discussion. Again, it's open for this committee to constitute a subcommittee. In terms of how that might be done, perhaps again I could suggest that a paper is brought to this committee with a wider how to engage wider strategic partnership, and that can look at all possibilities and options for how that engagement might best go forward and best support this committee.
I've got Councillor Bolton and then Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I really just want to come in on this debate because I think it's really important we hear from the users of public transport, whether that be tram, train, bus, bicycles. I think it's really important. I think perhaps your suggestion as a subcommittee so that we could have all those public transport users together. As regards train companies, there could be a conflict of interest on occasions there. So I think probably they can come and address the committee. But I think if we do involve the train operators, as I say, I think there could be some conflict of interest issues.
Thank you. Just before I bring Councillor Peacock in, I think obviously it's really good to have your views, but I think from what we've said just here today, I think it'd be good to have a meeting away from here, like a subcommittee, for all members, and we can discuss this there and come up with some suggestions, then we can pass for officers to look at. Is that all right with everybody? I'll bring Councillor Peacock in. I think that'd be a fair way to do it.
Yeah, just one consideration perhaps within that sort of forum would be to widen the technical officer group within that and use some of the expertise within district and borough councils around that particularly. As I say, we'll know certainly by December what the emerging unitary authority groups are. So I think that could be one of the sort of basis for discussion.
Can I just suggest that members bring their ideas forward before that committee, so we can give them to officers, so we can do some work, so we can actually do something and make some decision at that committee rather than have another meeting. Does that make sense? Yeah? So we'll set a date and then we'll inform you all. Myself and the Deputy Chair will do that. Thank you. Is that all right with everybody on that item? And I'm not trying to rush you. Yeah? Item 6, the Transport Transition Plan. I'd like to invite Peter Mann, the Interim Transport Programme Director, to present the plan for the operational transfer of the local transport services.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring you in your agenda, page 24, item 6, if you've got access to the papers and the report. I've got some slides just a few slides just to highlight the key things in the paper. I recognise and acknowledge and thank members for those of you who were able to turn up to some briefings that we offered in the summer. So a lot of this is not going to be new to you, I hope, and we can quickly get through this item in terms of getting the comments back from you in terms of an update. But I thought I'd highlight a few things in terms of where we were with the transition. You'll recall that when EMCCA was created on 28th of February 2024, that followed a lengthy period of discussion with the government around how the powers and the functions of particularly the transport in the transport area were to be created and managed. And from the beginning, from the inception, EMCCA has been the local transport authority, looking after primarily the strategic transport functions, but also managing the funding as the funding comes through at EMCCA level now rather than the constituent authority level. We're also responsible for the public transport functions, bus-based, largely bus-based public transport functions. And we're in the process now of transitioning and transferring those functions into EMCCA from our constituent authorities, and that's what this process is bringing to a conclusion, hopefully over the next few months. So just a reminder then to members and those who haven't seen this before, what is transferring? Essentially it's a whole load of bus contracts and other systems contracts, funding and budgets, as well as staff related to a number of different bus-based public transport functions, with 170 contracts, funding from government that's been coming in from government for the Bus Service Improvement Plan, BSIP as it's called, and for other things like ZEBRA, which is the Zero Emission Bus Funding Pot from government, will continue to be given to this region, be given through EMCCA in the future. Bus infrastructure, including stops and shelters, bus stations and park and rides, will be transferring, along with the responsibility to provide comments and advice to local planning authorities on the implications for public transport of applications and local plans. The whole management of concessions and ticketing, both statutory and discretionary, is also transferring to EMCCA, along with a customer service function in the context of complaints handling and customer interface management, including also passenger information and mapping and timetables and that sort of thing. So it's quite a big area of transition of functions. That essentially involves quite a large number of staff and fairly significant budgets. But I wanted to just flag a few benefits that this consolidation, this transition is expected to bring, and we will make sure that there's an improvement program as part of this post-transition that will see the benefits realised over the coming months and years. That it will bring greater consistency and coordination across the bus network. As we know, as we acknowledge, this is a very mixed region in terms of the provision of services, rural and urban particularly, but also in pockets, in different types of area. There's very good practice, but there's also some real holes, if you like, in the network. It will give us greater clout, greater influence, both through the mayor, but also directly as an organisation with bus operators and providers of services. And we're looking to consolidate, as the mayor mentioned earlier, the enhanced partnership model, which is the model that isn't the franchising model in terms of how we work with our bus operators across the region. We've also touched on investment and one of the important components of consolidation and transition is to maximise that value of investment as we go forward, to make sure it's targeted in the right direction. We would be able to, will be able to create further incentives using the funding that's available from government for ticketing, for lower price travel for young people, for example, or other categories of user to encourage people to use public transport more. And also have a real customer focus in terms of coordination of timetables. And we've heard questions this morning about how we might align and better coordinate rail and bus, for example. And there's a real opportunity in terms of having the scale of activity in one place to be able to engage with the operators, the rail and bus operators along those lines. Improving transport interchanges through investment and through better coordination, working with our district and borough colleagues, some of whom look after the interchanges and the bus infrastructure. And there's a lot of best practice in this region. There's award-winning bus companies, there's award-winning initiatives around bus integration, particularly with colleges and with the health service. And I think what we need is to identify where they are and look to scale that up and roll that out further across the region. Clearly, bringing something into one place can provide the opportunity for economies of scale. So doing more with the same as a principle, with more efficient operations, both internally but also in relation to the engagement with the bus industry. Greater connectivity, again, understanding the network, understanding where the gaps are, and looking for different ways of filling those gaps, whether it's demand responsive transport, whether it's conventional supported services, whether it's getting operators to run more commercial services off their own back by targeting capital investment to support a particular route, for example. And there's real opportunity to, again, harness good practice around innovation and new technology where that is currently being tested and trialled. Particularly in the cities, there's a real opportunity, I think, to expand that into the county areas and make best use of that. So in terms of progress along the transition timeline, if you like, there's, and the report talks about this, there is a lot of work going on around the public transport contribution, known as the transport levy, around the transfer of the budgets that are currently tied up with the authorities for running bus services or providing the concessionary fare reimbursement, etc., and how those budgets come to EMCCA so that we can actually do that once the functions fully transfer across. There's quite a lot of systems development as well, as you'd expect, in terms of finance systems, information systems, procurement and contract management. And of course, there's an awful lot of discussion going on with staff groups. There's a group of around 69, I think, staff or posts have been identified across the four authorities that would be within the TUPE transfer consultation process and eventually bringing them across into EMCCA. That requires organisational planning, incorporating those people and the resources and the skills they bring into our EMCCA structure, which currently exists of a transport strategy and a transport investment structure. There's inevitably a fair amount of legal and procurement work tied up with this activity. We're working on an inter-authority agreement, and the heads of terms for the inter-authority agreement is in now an advanced stage of creation, and Catherine, my colleague, is leading on that and working across with the monitoring officers from each of the authorities to bring that through to EMCCA board for the principal decision in the not too distant future. And we've been doing some stakeholder engagement with bus operators particularly, but also user groups and through the enhanced partnership boards that exist across the region. There are 4 of those at the moment. But we've been talking to bus company MDs about what they can expect with EMCCA taking this work on going forward and how the relationships need to be formed and reconfigured slightly. There's clearly quite a lot of decisions and delegations. There were some in principle decisions made by EMCCA board previously, earlier in the summer, which are now being taken through the scheme of delegations process, so that officers are able to make decisions in consultation around the key things that need to happen. In terms of transition dates, we are still formally aiming for the end of November. That might have to move, and I think it's a little bit in the hands of the conversations going on around the inter-authority agreement. But we're still targeting that. The hard stop, if you like, is the end of the financial year, and that's where we have an agreement with the Department for Transport that will be the end of the formal transition period. So we're working very hard as a collective group of officers from across the 4 authorities and within EMCCA to bring this transition about and for then EMCCA to launch a programme of improvement so that we can, as I said earlier, harness the benefits of that integration for the long term. The recommendation, I've just put these on this slide here, the recommendations summarised on this slide from the committee report are about endorsing and noting. Appreciate what Councillor Ralph said previously, there's a lot of endorsing and noting going on, but actually this is important in terms of noting the progress that is being made. A lot of it is being done by the officer groups and the monitoring officers and the finance directors and so on. They're all involved in this process. So largely it is for noting what decisions have been made previously by the EMCCA board and the progress that we're making towards the transition, and ultimately EMCCA taking on those public transport functions for the long term. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Woodins.
Thank you very much. Yes, obviously very happy to endorse the report. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of queries that prompted. Obviously, one of the issues is that the tram responsibility for that side of it will be staying with Nottingham City Council until the PFI ends in 2034. And obviously the tram currently run at least, I think it's at least 7 of the park and ride sites in and around Nottingham as well. So when you talk about park and ride development alongside the buses, are they included or excluded? And I'm quite interested as well as about, obviously it's very important, the liaison and consultation with the different bus companies. I mean, the advantage of Nottingham was that we have the NCT bus company, good links with other bus providers, and the tram as well. So there was a very much coordinated approach. And I'm just wondering what the plan is to see if that, you know, how you will actually replicate or include decisions that might affect tram journeys as well in relation to the new powers that are going over. Obviously, I think we're all very interested in the concessionary fares decision when that comes. There's some very strong opinions and some, you know, in certain areas, groups with very high needs who've been accommodated as far as that's concerned. So interested in sort of like a timeline on that as well. And you've said, obviously, you know, end of November to try and get all of the functions in, but you've sort of recognised that that's going to be a bit of you know, push to actually get to that date. So I just wondered, do you feel that you have enough capacity within the team to actually drive that through before the end of the financial year, which is the absolute hard stop for that? And I really welcome the extension of single ticketing options across the geography of the region. There's no need to reinvent the wheel on that, because it's already existing in, as you say, several locations, including in Nottingham, where I can use either of the two main bus companies or a tram and have a single day limit on my Robin Hood card. So I just, you know, it charges me up to 1 day's travel, and then I don't get charged for any further journeys. And I really hope that we will be taking that expertise in that. It was quite a difficult journey to single ticketing in Nottingham especially. I hope you'll be, pulling in their technical knowledge about how you actually deliver that with the different companies, because it can get quite complex about who gets how you divide up the fare between the different companies that have actually used that, and the technology from, I think it's from Init that we used. As I say, it's in and it's working really well. Obviously it had teething problems, the same as any new systems do as well. So very much welcome the move to single ticketing options across the region.
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. Peter, do you want to comment on that? Shall we do one at a time?
Yes, I can do, yeah. Is that still on? Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Woodings, for your comments and questions. Yes, you're right. The operation of the tram is not transitioning. That's something that remains largely under the remit of Nottingham City because of the financial arrangements that you've referred to. In terms of the park and rides, I think where we have bus-based park and rides, I think it sort of makes sense for those to move to EMCCA. Where we've got dedicated tram-only park and rides, I think that might be a different issue. But I need to take that away and have a think about that, because ultimately EMCCA needs to have available to it, if you like, all the main components of running a public transport network. So
just for information, the buses do connect with the tram park and rides, so it's definitely going to be part of the consideration.
So yeah, and that interface with tram, as you've mentioned, the coordination between tram and bus, I think is really important. We don't want to lose that, and certainly where there are existing relationships with the tram operator and bus operators, we absolutely want to keep those going. The reality is that the people who are looking after those at the moment, the officers who are working within Nottingham City Council and the other authorities, will probably, at least initially, continue doing what they're doing now, but they'll be with EMCCA. So we'll look to try and ensure that there is good continuity across all of that. You talked about concessionary fares and decisions that might need to be made around concessionary fares. At the moment, there's a variety of different concessions. Obviously, there's the statutory concessionary fare scheme, the national scheme, which clearly won't change. There are some discretionary concessions and other ticketing options, smart ticketing options, across the region. And we're doing a piece of work. We've had a little bit of work done already to understand the scale of that and the costs and so on. I think the reality is that certainly for the short term, we need to just keep everything as it is, because we're not in a position yet to resource up a proper study and a proper consideration of how we might look to harmonise concessions across the region. But clearly, one of the advantages that I talked about earlier is to get the consistency of provision of the public transport offer to all of our residents and visitors and businesses across the region. So that will be something that will be part of that improvement programme going forward. You talked about the date, and can we achieve the date? Do we have enough resources? I think, yes, we just about have enough resources, and we do recognise that actually the work that the authorities are doing, particularly to support this, is on top of their day job, and I acknowledge that. The EMCCA resource for this is largely sort of bought in, if you like, in order to get this over the line. But you know, there is a tension there, and I do acknowledge that, and very much thank and welcome the support that I'm getting from the authorities' officers, because we wouldn't be able to get where we are without that. we absolutely have the hard stop in March. We've got to, and I think everyone is focused on delivering it before then, and the intention would be to do that. And as far as I know, you know, we're still on track for doing that and getting the key decisions made. And finally, the single ticketing option. I think, you know, that's tied up really in the aspiration, and I know the Mayor's talked about it before, about having you know, a simple way of travelling and a certain way of travelling, and knowing what people are paying for and getting the value by travelling multi-mode across the region. And that's certainly an aspiration within our plan.
Thank you, Peter. I have Councillor Mellon next.
Thank you. I thank you, Peter, for your presentation. This seems to be the biggest moment for the combined authority so far. And you talked about opportunity, but there's risk here, reputational risk, because if things don't go right on day one, then the blame will come here, and we need to make sure that the concentration is on day one, whatever that might be, that things work as they do now, or we've had some questions from the public about things not working as well as they could do. Actually, if we can improve them, that's also a really good reputational opportunity. I think for the things that are to be improved, that should be a secondary priority. The first priority is get things working on day one. If we can improve things on day two or in day 2002, then that will be great. But let's just make sure we do everything we can to make sure every element of transport across our region will work.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes, absolutely acknowledge that, and again, that is a focus of the team, of the programme team, and the discussions we've been having with colleagues. It's particularly important around the customer interface, where customers have got questions and queries and complaints and so on, that they know how to get the information they need. And that's now a very sharp focus of the work that we're doing around that customer service function, and about how the handling of that is going to be incorporated into EMCCA, but potentially how that interface works in the short term, and then moving forward as EMCCA establishes its capability and capacity.
Thanks for that. I've got Councillor Ralph next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't normally raise local situations in strategic meetings like this, but I think they represent a couple of good examples that I think EMCCA need to be aware of structurally so that it's built in. One is we've had an issue just north of Hucknall of Gedling putting in a huge planning application for a huge number of houses that don't impact Gedling's towns at all. They sit directly onto Ashfield towns. That's one issue aside, but one of the things that we raised when we actually sort of said, no, let's have a meeting about strategically planning around this, is the fact that one side of that site is boundaried by the Robin Hood line, and yet no thought or consideration had been put into either a rail stop or a small modest extension of the tram line from Hucknall up to service this huge number of houses, which goes back to Lisa's point earlier about sustainable planning in there. So just a question around what capacity is being built in to the team to make sure that they can be involved and broker and proactively drive forward solutions in situations like this that cover multiple authorities and multiple transport functions. Second question related to that is, I've been around a good number of local government tuping situations around transport, and they are points of extreme disruption. You've mentioned about new IT systems, new contracts, and I think Councillor Mellon's point's quite right around making sure that day one is hitting the deck running. But equally, and you know, this isn't everyone. There are some brilliant, brilliant motivated people, but there are also people who it's easy to say no. People don't get fired for saying no. And yet, we need people to be driving forward with the ambition that we want to have. There is a massive opportunity with this £2 billion to achieve something fantastic, and we need to be getting on with it. How do we build into the team at this point of massive disruption the right attitude and culture so that they are grasping this opportunity?
Thank you, Councillor Rolfe. Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, some really good points. I mean, the sort of capacity issue in relation to the planning function and the interface with the planning authority, I think, is a really important point. And what we've discovered in the context of the work that we've done with the authorities to date is that, yes, there are a few holes in teams for various reasons, historical reasons, funding reasons, etc. But actually what we've mapped is all the capabilities that we believe EMCCA needs to do the job fully and properly. And what we do need to do, and certainly some of the funding that we're getting from government will enable this, is to resource up effectively so that we have got a fully functional transport function. That definitely includes the bus-related and public transport issues, but also the broader strategy and investment programme work as well. And we're still recruiting. We're still needing to grow the teams both within the current structure, but also seeing, in effect, the transfer of the resources doesn't always come with a person, it comes with a budget for a vacancy, for example. So all of that is being considered as part of this. And the planning function, which sits within the broader sort of policy area, bus policy area, and the interface with planning, also plays into the transport strategy work, and I think is a really important role that EMCCA as the Transport Authority will have going forward. And so, picking up the issues of local applications and development proposals and local plans, and providing appropriate comments in and indeed asks from that process is very much part of the thinking, part of the planning and resourcing plan. So we're not quite there yet. I don't know how quickly we can get there, but certainly we've recognised that capability is a requirement that we need to have.
Thank you for that. In your answer, though, there is a few things that I think we potentially need to sort of change our terminology on, because we keep talking about transport and the transport team, but then underlying it very much is bus, 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 because that's what their current function is. How do we make sure that when we're talking about transport, we mean the broader transport picture and we don't end up getting sucked into just looking at buses?
Well, yeah, I mean, the transport function is multimodal. So, yes, there's a big bus-focused transition, but there's already within the team a transport strategy capability that is multimodal. We've got rail experts, we've got active travel experts, we've got other people who can understand highways and highway impacts and the whole highway and traffic modelling capabilities and all of that. So we've got a team already that is growing and building its capability and capacity so that we do have a rounded approach to the challenges that we face and indeed, and help to work with not only EMCCA's spatial development strategy, but also the local plans that are emerging from each of the authorities and indeed what comes off of those, which is ultimately planning applications and development proposals. So I think it is acknowledged. I recognise that this particular report and this particular transition is very bus focused, and you're right, because that's where the resources haven't been transferred as yet or built at EMCCA. But the bigger picture around multimodal transport is very much part of the equation.
Thank you. I have Councillor Swan next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm particularly confident that franchising is not the way that we should be going at this moment in time. So extremely happy to see that. I'm sure we've all got local bus providers or bus services that are family owned, particularly in Derby. I can talk about that. But some of the challenges that we have is the duplication of services. And I just want to know, in terms of influence from this committee, how do we make sure that services providers currently can work better together and that services streamlined and not duplicated because of competition? And sorry, and secondly, second question, so that's that one. I think in terms of concessionary fares, that's an extremely interesting and very important point that is being raised today. And I just wanted to know, have we got a timeline in terms of when we will have that data to enable us to understand broadly what's happening across the region in terms of concessionary fares? Because I think in some regions we've got a gold star and some regions we've got no stars. And, how do we bridge that gap, because people need to see that the East Midlands Combined Authority is bringing something to the region and not taking something away, which will be a huge risk for the region if we don't get that right.
Thank you. So on the not franchising, what's the alternative? Well, it is enhanced partnership. It is enhanced partnership boards, and I know, Councillor, you chair the Derby City one, which I had the pleasure of being at earlier in the week. And I think what we've seen through the enhanced partnership boards across the 4 authorities is a real collaboration. I recognise what you're saying, though, about we are in a competitive, deregulated bus environment, and that does generate competition, you know, for whatever reason and benefits that brings. There's a risk to that in terms of duplication of effort and resource. And I think it is the role, and certainly will be in future, the role of EMCCA having a single approach to enhanced partnership, to deal with those things, to identify where there's problems in the network as part of a broader network review, and to get real with bus operators around what they're doing, what they're providing, and we want them to be absolutely part of that partnership approach. You know, I know, Mayor Clare, you're very strong on this in terms of ensuring that we are getting from our bus operators really good performance and a really strong commitment to improvement, rather than just looking to make a quick buck or a saving in some particular route or other. So I would say that the enhanced partnership model is the right model for us at the moment. We've got a huge variety of regional, of rural and urban mix, which does create problems which I don't think a franchising model would resolve at this point. And just on concessionary timeline, what I said earlier was that we will need to look to replicate largely what's currently being offered on the concessionary fares picture for next year, because we do need to spend time, we do need to consult and engage and understand what the options are and what the potential costs are of other options around concessions. So my plan is to bring a paper back to this committee which will look at next year, look at 26-27, but also give an indication as to what the timeline is likely to be for further review and then a future scheme to be brought forward. I'm hoping that will be the 30th of October meeting, but it depends a little bit on some legal advice that we're waiting on at the moment.
Thank you, Peter. I've got Anthony next.
Thanks, Chair. I think for me, just one of the bits that I'm keen to sort of understand better sort of how it'll work for us is that particular role, although we're not looking at franchising within the East Midlands for the reasons that have been sort of specified, there are a number of our neighbours that are going down the franchising route. And I think for me, I'm just wanting to, although it's listed as part of the operations team role, I think for me, I'm just wanting to understand that we're best placed as possible to make sure that we can sort of have that appropriate impact with our neighbours that are making decisions on some of those services that are important to local residents but are part of the franchising network, for how it's going to work for those of us that, you know, for our setup that won't be part of the franchising network. Because I know on some occasions sort of, you know, the relationship has been very much, you know, I think particularly on occasions with our friends in Greater Manchester, the relationship has been a little bit, we're doing this, if you don't give us the money then we'll carry on doing whatever we're doing anyway. But I think, you know, importantly for those services that are cross-border, whether it's into Manchester, Sheffield or wherever, I think it's just making sure that we've got the right clout available to make sure that we're getting as good a deal as we can for whatever our funding is, but also that we're engaged fully in that sort of service process on a franchise network for our unfranchised network.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. The cross-boundary with Greater Manchester and South Yorkshire particularly pertinent. Obviously, Greater Manchester a bit further forward on their franchising delivery. South Yorkshire developing that thinking. And yes, we need to continue, because it's already happening, engage with those authorities in terms of understanding what the impacts of franchise routes coming into our patch have on the network and indeed on costs. So that's something, and obviously we've already got, as Mayor Clare mentioned earlier, a peak partnership arrangement with Mayor Andy Burnham and Mayor Oliver COPARD. That is a useful mechanism at the highest level, if you like, for that engagement and that conversation to be had.
Thanks, Peter. We've got no more speakers, so we've got to take the recommendations. I'm going to do a formal vote, so obviously if we could have a show of hands if you agree with the proposals in front of us today. Can I have a show of hands, please, from members? That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item 7, Transport Investment Programme, Development Process. Can I invite Alex Linton to put this forward, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this next item is to talk about... Sorry, it keeps turning itself off. I did definitely turn it on. All right, I see. This next item is around the investment programme and specifically the process that we're proposing going through across the rest of this financial year to get us to a position where we have an initial programme to start implementation from April. What we're asking for from committee is to review that process to gets us to a point where by April we have that agreed process, we have a programme in place that we're able to commit to. In order to achieve that, we'd be looking at having a draft programme in place by the end of this calendar year, which then allows the first quarter of 2026 to go through that formal approval process through Transport Committee and Mayoral Combined Authority Board. There are some key responsibilities in there, so the detailed work, the legwork in this will be led through the technical officers group, which has representation from the 4 constituent authorities at head of service level and from ourselves in the transport team. The oversight of this work will be through the newly established priority boards and strategic leadership team within EMCCA, but then the gateway approvals and decision making will be through this board and ultimately through EMCCA board early in the new year. This slide is just a reminder of the scale of programme that we're currently talking about. The majority of our funding has now all been subsumed into the Transport for City Regions programme. So in this year, in the 25-26 column, you can see that's a relatively low amount of 55 million capital, no revenue, but then there are a number of other funding streams beneath that. This is the final year where we will have that diversity of funding streams. From next year onwards, the £2 billion is all subsumed into that single block across the top. So we'll be looking at 183 million capital and up to 14 million revenue next year, and then steadily increasing quite significantly across the coming years through to 2031-32, where we're looking at more than double the scale of programme that we've got at the moment. From those other categories of funding beneath, we will no longer receive any CRSTS revenue funding beyond 26-27. That will be part of our TCR capital. The Highways Maintenance Block, which is the annual programme for the highway authorities to deliver maintenance and resilience on their network, has been subsumed into this pot centrally, as has the Integrated Transport Block, which was the discretionary funding that went to constituent authorities for the lower value, higher volume interventions, generally more localised, smaller scale investments. In terms of the bus funding, we will still be eligible for revenue bus funding. That is separate to the TCR programme. The capital funding for the infrastructure has been subsumed into this pot. And then the active travel funding, which is currently delivered through Active Travel England, sits outside of this allocation. So while there's no indication at the moment of what future settlements might be, they are not assumed to be part of the TCR. So that's the funding programme that we are looking to start developing. In the appendices to the report, I think it was Appendix C, there was a more detailed breakdown of the step-by-step process that we're proposing going through to get us to that goal of implementation in April. This slide just picks out some of the headlines from that and some of the key areas that I wanted to draw attention to. So obviously today's meeting, we're looking at the process. So we're not starting to talk about any specific allocations or making any specific commitments to that. It's just to make sure that the process encompasses what committee would like to see in there. Across the rest of this month, we are going to be conducting a review of the existing pipeline. We do have an existing pipeline of schemes. Proposals have been put forward from a number of different forums over the last year to 18 months. That is comprehensive, and its scale is already way beyond any funding that we would have available to us, but it is constituent of very different levels of scheme. Some very well developed schemes, some that have already been through business case development and are more or less ready to go. Others that are not a great deal more at the moment than a need that's been identified or an initial concept. And so we need to work through that to get it cleansed, to update it, to make sure that the details of that are relevant and current. At the next meeting, so across September and October, leading up to October committee, we want to define what the priority investment themes are going to be for this programme. 2 billion has to cover all of our local transport investment. That is obviously a wide range of things and could very easily consume that money very, very quickly. What we want to do, and what we'll be bringing back to committee next month, is agree what those priority themes need to be, both in terms of the early years, where do we want to focus initially, and then the longer term, more strategic level of investment. While we're developing options for those priority themes, we'll also be defining the criteria assessment framework for that. So that is the way that we will be able to transparently assess all of the proposals and use that to help inform that prioritisation. That isn't just a straightforward replication of DFT's guidance. Obviously, we do need to recognise that national level guidance, but it will also recognise the outputs from the Inclusive Growth Commission, the priorities of the Mayoral Transport Plan, of the Local Growth Plan, the Developing Outcomes Framework that will be established, but also more scheme-specific intervention or criteria in terms of deliverability, contribution to social value, the individuals, the people, the demographics that will be affected by it. The intention is to bring the paper back to this committee on the 30th of October with options for that prioritisation and what those themes could be, and for the decision to be made at this board on how to progress from that. Concurrently, we're going to need to start doing the first sift of those proposals, so essentially starting the shortlisting process. At that first stage will be primarily ruling out the things that are either too far in advance for us to be committing to at the moment, or possibly don't identify or demonstrate any of the strategic contributions that we need to make. Through November, there will be a second iteration of that, and essentially it will be an initiative process to funnel down from that longer list and the new proposals that come in down to a more defined programme. We have agreed with Overview and Scrutiny Board that we will present the outcome from the committee meeting on the 30th to their 20th of November board. That gives us an additional perspective, an alternative view on those thematic priorities and how the programme is developing. That would then be leading through to, in December, getting to a final draft programme that would then feed into the formal approval cycle, which comes back to this board at the January meeting, leading through to March EMCCA. The intention being that at that stage we have an agreed programme which we can start the implementation of in April. So just to bring a bit of focus to specifically what we're asking from committee. So for today, it's to agree or comment on the process and that objective of having a draft programme by December and implementation in April. The next action for the committee will then be to discuss and make decision on what those priority investment themes should be for the programme. That wouldn't just be in terms of the types of investment, but it will also be how long do we project forward? Which are the things that we need to look at for over a multi-year settlement right now? Which are the things that we only need to look at in the shorter term? And how do we balance that with the need to retain the ability to respond to the adapting Mayor's Transport Plan as that evolves throughout next year? January will be approval of the draft programme, so will then be an itemised programme, which will be the output from the work that committee agree in October. I've also referenced there the opportunity for informal committees and member workshops to help be involved in the more detailed discussions around that. I don't think this forum is appropriate to be talking through dozens and dozens of schemes because I think it would just consume the whole meeting, but I would welcome the opportunity where we have discussed previously possibly having informal meetings or workshops with members, the chance to talk through those things in a bit more detail. So that's the process and that's the ask of committee from today.
Thank you, Alex. I've got Councillor Woodins.
Yes, thank you very much for that overview, and I'm very supportive of the timeline that you've actually put in for this first programme coming up of infrastructure. It's quite interesting, and I do think it would be really good to have those sort of non-formal meetings where we can actually talk about the evaluation process, the value add of each of the projects that are coming forward. I personally don't particularly have an issue with us having a pipeline of things coming through before the big transport plan has come through, because all of the constituent authorities will already have a pipeline of projects that were being put forward on a valued basis anyway, and we need to get on with these things. I mean, I just went to the opening of the new Maid Marian Way junction yesterday. It's almost completed, but those works have been going on since November 2024. So, you know, these projects take a long time, so we need to be getting on with things. We can't be waiting for the plan before we actually do that. That said, I think I'm quite interested in Councillor Relf's comments about the value of having that insight, because obviously we have an investment committee for EMCCA. We have a housing and land committee for EMCCA as well. And really to understand the value of the transport pipelines and how they're actually going to interconnect. You know, there's no point building up an island of employment growth if people can't actually get there if they don't have a car. And Nottingham has one of the lowest car ownership levels in the country because we have a very thorough and comprehensive transport system, but we're going to have real difficulty getting our people to access the new jobs around the airport and the new Freeport down there, the new site of the Radcliffe-on-Soar, the Amazon warehouses, etc., etc. That's a huge issue for our citizens, and we know that Junction 24 is getting to capacity for road transport there as well. So I just think having that understanding across the different EMCCA committees, obviously that is something that the board will no doubt obviously have to oversee that, but we need to understand when we're approving things about how they're going to open up other opportunities for growth across the region. My second point is just to ask about, obviously at this stage, we're setting up the pipeline and we've been given a timeline, but how do you anticipate this going forward in the future? Is the pipeline always going to be open for things to be developed and added to it? Or do you intend to sort of like have it on a phased basis where you'll say, right, well, the next phase of pipelines will be for this date? And so people can have a bit of forward planning as far as future pipelines are concerned. So it's just really an understanding about how you intend this, because I appreciate this is the first pipeline, but how do you anticipate it working in the future as well?
Thank you. Alex?
I see the pipeline as being a constant open opportunity. We would always invite people to put ideas forward to us. There'll be needs that arise that haven't been anticipated that need immediate response. What I would like to do following the October committee, when we've identified that level of commitment in terms of time that we're looking at, we can then start looking at where we may phase a more proactive approach to reviewing that pipeline and putting new options into the programme. But certainly the opportunity for people to seek advice from the transport team, to put ideas forward and to discuss and develop those is a constant open opportunity.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mellon next.
To improve things, and that this current government is honouring and increasing the amount of money that we're going to have available. I'm very happy with the process. In those meetings, I always felt a bit sorry for Councillor McEwen, because he told us about getting up in the middle of the night to get to the meeting and going into Manchester and various other ways. And I think you're getting your own back today, Anthony, because those of us who've travelled for nearly 3 hours to get here, I think underline the point that we have much to do in this region to be able to get to here. I always try and come by public transport. My options today were on a train to go to Derby, then Stockport, then here. There was a bus that went from Derby to Ashbourne, then here. and we drove because that was going to be the best way and we were still late. So I think this is an opportunity for us to improve things, and we need to think really carefully about what's the most important place to get to. I agree with Councillor Woodings that places of employment, not just at Junction 24, but in Ashfield Junction 27, both from Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, there are jobs there, and there are desperately needed jobs for people in our communities, the people we represent. So I'm really excited about this, and I think it will be a really great thing that you'll be able to stand up, Mayor Clare, and say, look, we've made a difference to transport in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and I welcome it.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment on the final point there around the access to the different locations. Obviously, the local growth plan, the emerging local growth plan has identified those 7 growth areas which we launched at UK Reef earlier this year. And one of the criteria that I didn't mention before when we talked about the assessment was whether or not investments do link to those sites. We do have to keep in mind, though, that this programme has to address the whole region. It's got to be essentially for all users, all people on our transport network across the whole area. So it won't focus entirely on just those 7 areas, but certainly accessibility to those and making the connection to those and supporting delivery of that local growth plan will be an important part of how we develop the programme.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points and questions. One, the fact that we've got no district and borough council officers involved in the technical officers group, I think is a missed opportunity there, because at the end of the day, the county councils don't have the full top to bottom coverage of all functions, whereas the unitary city councils do. And so I think you are still potentially missing out on input around regeneration, local business support, all of those things that feed into this broader picture, that therefore might end up with the situation where investment ends up being skewed to the cities because of that lack of involvement. One question, you mentioned around active travel not being in this pot of money. If we are wanting to fund active travel projects, how will that interact and engage with projects that are being managed elsewhere so that we've got a cohesive picture? And then final question is I'm still yet to have a picture of how you are managing the funnel of projects. How do we get from idea through to a fully evidenced, figured out plan that we know is costed? Because there needs to be checkpoints along the way of going, okay, that's worth throwing some money at to develop it on. Who's making those decisions? What decision criteria are going to be applied to that? Because I don't want to end up missing out on project ideas that are good. And likewise, you know, the question of, yes, we've got an immediate burning investment that we need to get on with. And you know, people do want to see money being spent and things being achieved. But ultimately, the existing pipeline will come from 4 highways authorities. And I think we need to be making sure that we are at the EMCCA level, thinking more strategically and cross-modal. And so I don't want to end up ploughing on because there's urgency, when actually it would be better to invest this early money in developing projects that go fully cross-modal. So they're my points and questions.
Thank you. Alex?
With regards to the active travel point, first of all, the Active Travel England funding is exclusive of this programme, but we could still fund active travel interventions through here, and not trying to preempt the October priorities, but one of those that we will be including is a level of commitment to active travel. So it's not that we won't be funding active travel interventions, whether they be walking, wheeling or cycling, through this pot. It's just the additional source of funding from Active Travel England is still available to us on top of this.
It was more a question, I accept that, it's more a question of how that cohesive programme of projects will be brought together, and we don't end up with different people going off and doing different things that don't work together.
And I think that comes to the second question you raised around the process and how that filtering is going to happen. The intention is to use the existing forums, and I appreciate your comment about TOG being predominantly the constituent authorities and not having the districts and boroughs, and so we need to consider how we deal with that and how we make sure that balance is recognised. But it's through that collaborative forum where the process of reviewing, assessing, scoring, and identifying the priorities of those schemes comes through. That would, or part of that would be recognising things like the local cycling, walking and improvement plans. So it's not just about Active Travel England funding this and us funding that. It's that plan. What is the strategic justification for putting a project forward? I've referenced the Mayor's Transport Plan and the Growth Plan as other strategic documents that we would be looking for all the proposals to demonstrate how they align with those. And it's that collective strategic contribution that will help us ensure that we're not creating silos of funding that aren't recognising each other. In terms of the development of schemes, the revenue funding in there is predominantly for capability and capacity, which really is about how are we going to develop the continued pipeline. 90 odd million over the course of 6 years in isolation seems like a sizable amount of money for revenue. In reality, in the context of a £2 billion programme, it's not a lot, so we do need to have a very clear and detailed plan of how we're going to use that funding. I don't have the answer for that yet. That will be part of those October proposals. Now, how do committee advise that we use that revenue funding to make sure that we are developing that continued pipeline, that we are getting the opportunity to look a few years in advance and start the work now to have those strategic investments ready at a later date for the capital funding to source.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Councillor Alf. Councillor Big.
Thanks for the explanations on those three separate areas. And I'm just interested, just now you explained how the funding increases significantly over time between now and 2032. How much flexibility is there in that if there are programme changes? Because listening to what everybody said about multimodal solutions and connecting the spatial strategy or growth strategy areas, there's got to be some flexibility in there because it may be that we, if possible, and I know they can have long lead-in times, but that we want to deliver projects earlier.
Thank you. Alex?
We've not had the full formal guidance from DFT yet. It was them that defined that financial profile, so the funding over those years. If we are in a position where we want to accelerate funding, if we feel, for example, not next year, the year after, 240 million isn't enough, we're in a position to spend more than that, there is an opportunity to open that discussion with DFT about accelerating the funding. But because we haven't got the full guidance yet, I don't really know how that process exactly is going to work. Using previous examples, so the current DFT active programme is the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which is essentially the predecessor to TCR. They were very open to authorities putting in submissions for accelerated funding at the time. So generally around sort of September to November time, they would be talking to us and saying that, no, if there's anything that you do need to accelerate, please bring it forward. I think that was most on the basis of most places were delivering slightly behind the curve of the funding profile, and so DFT were keen to see if there were ways that they could move it around. So while that isn't a definitive, this is exactly what's going to happen next time round, through that experience, we can be confident that if we want to vary from that profile, we can have those discussions with DFT, and if they can fund it, if they can cash flow it, they are open to us having funding in advance. Similarly, we may look at it and think, we've got a waiting for a particular strategic investment, it might be a sizable amount of money, that we're not ready to start spending in full this year, but we want to retain it and push it back to next year or the year after. Again, they're very open to that. The change control process needs to be defined, but certainly through the principle of devolution, they're trying to release some of the controls that they used to have on us and give us more opportunity for us to look at that funding profile and switch it backwards and forwards as we need to.
Thank you. If there's nobody else, obviously we've got two recommendations here. Can we have a show of hands if you agree with the recommendations? We'll move on to our final item. Is everybody all right? Did you want a 5-minute comfort break? Shall we crack on? Or crack on? Move on. Okay, thank you. Developer of the Mayor's Transport Plan and first round of consultation. Can I invite Claire Maltby to put this forward, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully that's working. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to give you an update on where we are with the development of the Mayor's Transport Plan. I just thought I'd start by noting that it's been referred to as different things through the course of this meeting. So the Regional Transport Strategy, the Local Transport Plan, we're calling it the Mayor's Transport Plan, so just make sure we're all on the same page. So just a reminder then of where we are in terms of our progress developing this plan. So work began some months ago in terms of scoping and pulling together the evidence base. And then a substantial report went to the March Committee on the emerging principles and policies, which was agreed. Today is an update, as I've said, and then we've really got our sights on the 30th of October at that formal committee meetings where we'd like to seek approval for the high-level first-stage consultation document. Once we get that approval, we'll then go out to a 12-week public consultation. We'll then use that feedback to further develop the full draft Mayor's Transport Plan. That will come out for consultation around summertime, seeking approval for the full Mayor's Transport Plan in winter 2026. Okay, so just an update on terms of what we've been doing over the last 6 months since March. The team has been collaborating closely with the constituent authorities, so we've continued to work through the TOG group and through the project working group, as well as holding specific workshops to make sure we're all aligned and on the same page in terms of the development of the plan. We've also continued to develop the evidence base and the data analysis. This is a really key part of kind of the foundation of the local transport plan, the Mayor's Transport Plan. And we've been using new tools, including Department for Transport's connectivity tool, which was just released, and the Midlands Connect carbon assessment tool. One of the other things we've been doing, working hard on over the last few months, is actually making sure that the Mayor's Transport Plan fits together coherently with the other key strategies that are being developed across EMCCA. So it needs to make sure that we're really well aligned, these things are pulling in the same direction, and that's what we've been working towards over the last couple of months. We've also, at the last meeting, there was an agreement that we should move forward with procurement of the integrated sustainability appraisal. That's a statutory part of any local transport plan. We've moved forward with that procurement, and the contract is due to be released soon, and that work will begin very shortly. We're also developing the consultation engagement activity and the process of how we're going to make sure we hear from the voices, as well as professional and expert stakeholders, the voices of all of our communities and places, and that plan's in development and will be coming to the 30th of October committee as well. And the final thing I wanted to mention is that we've been kick-started the work on developing our regional transport model. This is a really important piece of work to have available to us. We don't currently have a regional transport model. That will allow us to really explore the impacts of different interventions and understand more about the forecasting and future of transport right across the region. Okay, thank you. So just a reminder then of where we got to in March. These are the emerging principles that were agreed. So 4 strategic goal areas were agreed for the Mayor's Transport Plan. That was to increase modal choice, to better connect our communities, to create greater economic opportunity, and to protect our environment. Within that, we agreed 7 strategic theme areas, so to active, healthy, and vibrant places, strengthened and extended public transport, connected communities and new homes, a productive and inclusive economy, an integrated, sustainable, and resilient network, improving our unique natural and historic environment, and decarbonising travel as part of net zero. And then within that, I'm not going to read all of these out, but within that we then have the 22 detailed policies that really set the foundation of how we're going to be able to achieve these high-level objectives. Thank you. I also want to talk about the transport ambition statement. So going back to what I just said about making sure that the transport plan sits coherently within this bigger family of strategies and direction that EMCCA is setting. The inclusive growth framework, which is in development right now, is setting a core mission for EMCCA and then some supporting ambition statements. And connected communities is one of those ambition statements. So the last document that went to the committee in March had a vision statement for transport. And what we've done is refine this to make sure it really mirrors what's in that wider strategic framework. So the refined ambition statement for transport and connected communities is that by 2040, communities in the East Midlands will benefit from reliable, inclusive and sustainable connectivity through integrated transport and high-quality digital infrastructure, broadening access to opportunity, reducing reliance on private cars while driving investment across the region. Okay, I thought I'd take a minute as well to talk us through a bit more about the evidence base, because it's such an important part of underpinning what we then go on to in terms of the plan and the vision for transport. So I want to talk about the kind of, there's 4 key challenge areas and opportunity areas that we've identified within the local transport plan, the Mayor's Transport Plan. So just in brief, we've got the growing demand for travel with high car dependency. So we know we're seeing all of the forecasts from DFT show a really high demand and growing demand for travel across our region. This is mainly a result of population growth and housing growth. But for us in our region, this is twinned with one of the highest car dependencies in the country. That means we've got a high proportion of people commuting to work by car. We've got a high differential travel times between getting to key services by car versus getting to key services by public transport. We've generally got high car ownership, or acknowledging we've got pockets of low. And we also have some kind of residential sparsity with new housing often in rural areas or on the edge of towns. And all of that kind of starts to flow through into that car dependency. A second challenge area for us is around environmental impacts of travel. So of course mobility is desirable and essential, but also it has impacts on the environment, particularly carbon emissions, but also noise and local air pollution and impacts on nature. Thirdly, we've identified one of the challenge areas for the transport plan to be around network resilience and highway maintenance. So we know we've got a backlog of maintenance to be done. We also know we've got some ageing infrastructure. We've got challenges around higher volumes of traffic and higher, heavier vehicles of traffic as well. And we've got the impacts of changing climate and increased incidents of flooding, which impacts the highway network in particular. And then finally, the fourth challenge area we've pulled out is making sure we've got a transport system that works well for everyone. So we want to recognise that rather than have one city that's pulling everybody in, as we've talked about, we've got this polycentric area where we've got people travelling town to town, two big cities, and all of our rural areas. We need to make sure that our transport provides place-to-place connectivity for all of our communities and all of our visitors. But we also need to balance the needs of different users, so thinking about making sure we have an accessible and inclusive transport system. So, for example, we know in our region we've got higher than national average levels of disability. We also know we want to make sure our young people can travel safely and independently across the region. And we want to make sure that those without access to a car are able to reach the places they need to reach. So I'm going to share a little bit more about some of that evidence base now. So I thought I'd start with the growing demand and high car dependency. So as I said, we've got some pockets of very high population growth. So I think South Derbyshire's got the second highest population growth forecast in the country. And as you can see from the chart on the bottom right here, all of the forecasts from DFT show rising traffic demand for us from where we are now, some of them much higher. And as I say, that's been twinned with that car dependency. So we know that land use planning and spatial development, which has been come up today, is a key lever in how we influence travel demand. And that's why we want to make sure we work closely with our colleagues and make sure we have that integration. We need to make sure that transport planning and spatial planning and land use planning are properly integrated to get the best outcomes. I think it's also important that we acknowledge and recognise the uncertainty in forecasting and also think about our opportunity to influence those trends. You know, forecasts are not a done deal. You can influence them, you can change things depending on what levers you put in place. Thank you. I'll come to the next slide. So public transport is also a key priority for the Mayor's Transport Plan, and we want to make sure that our region is well connected and that people have options that don't just rely on car use. So we know that we've got a strong public transport offer regionally across some parts of the region with some award-winning operators. But as has also been mentioned today, we've got some areas where we have lower levels of customer satisfaction and poorer services. We also know, as you can see from this chart here, that the relative cost of transport by different modes all of the public transport options have outstripped the retail price index, but also bus fares have outstripped rail fares in terms of the cost. Our plan really is to explore how we ensure public transport is affordable and easy to use and how we make sure we have an improved experience for our customers. So I talked about making sure that transport really worked for everyone. So we talk about inclusive mobility, and that's, our evidence base has really explored that, and we've got to the experiences of different types of users of our transport network. This graph here, this map here shows the risk of transport-related social exclusion in our area. And the darker areas point to a higher risk of transport-related social exclusion. And what we mean by that when we talk about transport-related social exclusion, it's looking at two factors. So it's looking at people's access to everyday places, so workplaces, education, healthcare, banks, supermarkets, town centres, all of those types of places. And it looks at access by both car and by public transport. It then overlays that with an understanding of the vulnerability of the population to social exclusion. So it considers poverty, disability, caring responsibilities, poor health, and a range of other factors. And this analysis shows us that a quarter of our population live in areas that have a high risk of transport-related social exclusion, and that the districts around the northern urban core of the region come out particularly highly, particularly Bassetlaw and Bolsover. And the final area of analysis I wanted to talk about was transport-related carbon emissions. So we know that Transport Act 2000 requires the local transport plan to take into account government policies and guidance with respect to climate change. So we've done analysis about what our transport-related emissions look like. And we can see that our transport emissions are falling, but they're falling slowly compared to other sectors of the economy in our region, and they're falling slower than other combined authorities when it comes to transport-related emissions. So So transport emissions in EMCCA's area fell by almost 11% since 2005, whereas nationally there's been an 18% reduction in the same period. So this indicates that we do need to make greater progress in this area. So that talked about our story of where we are with emissions. This talks about our pathways looking forward. Recently, DfT put out the new guidance called the Quantifiable Carbon Guidance, and that provided advice on how to do carbon analysis to inform transport strategies like ours and schemes. So it's very timely that that's just come through. And within our team, we've been using the Midland Connect carbon assessment tool that was developed for the DfT, and so it's kind of one of the best practice models available. What this shows is that our pathways to decarbonisation are very challenging and that they require action on multiple policy fronts. So looking at this chart here, the dark blue line at the top, that's our business as usual pathway, and you can see it's a very long way from the green dotted line, which is the government's line to its legally binding 2050 carbon reduction target. So the evidence indicates there's a lot to do here. So in terms of next steps for the committee, we have talked about in some of those drop-in sessions, there would seem to be appetite for having an informal session where we can get more into the detail ahead of that 30th of October meeting, so that we're not just bringing a report for sign-off, and we have more of a discussion around that. So that's one option we wanted to bring to the table today. I wanted to kind of see if there are any comments on that community connectivity ambition statement, since it's been refined. And I just want to touch again on what it is we'll be bringing to the 30th of October committee. That's where we'll be seeking approval from the Mayor's Transport Plan for the high-level discussion document for publication, and seeking approval to the plan for engagement activity. And just a reminder that that first stage consultation document, that will be a short document, so maybe 15, 20 pages long. It will lay out the transport picture for our region, it will set out the objectives we're seeking to achieve, and the high-level policies to deliver. There'll then be a questionnaire which sets out the consultation questions to seek input from the public and stakeholders alike, and that will feed through into the full transport plan which will be developed the following year. We'll also bring the engagement plan for that 12-week consultation to share with you what activity we're planning, where across the region, how we're going to reach those different voices and those different insights, and we'll bring that to the committee on the 30th of October as well.
Thank you. Any? Councillor Mellon.
Thank you. That was a fascinating presentation, and it'd be really good if we could see the slides to take away and have a look at them. I suppose my comment is really, what do we want out of this consultation? Because that's quite a detailed and quite a high-level theoretical consultation, and that's important for us. We absolutely do need to get those carbon emissions down. But what do we want the big people across our region to say? Do we want them to say, my road needs improving? Do we need to say we need more buses? Or do we want them to comment on the general principles? I think we need to be clear about that. The other question I'd just ask is, this slide that showed that cars were, that bus travel and train travel was more expensive than cars, did that include every bit of on-cost with your cars, your insurance, your breakdown cover, as well as your fuel costs? Because actually I think we underestimate the costs of having cars.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of what we want from the consultation, what I just shared there, that won't actually be in the main consultation document. So we're planning to put out that 20-page consultation, but also an evidence annex that has the evidence summary in it for those expert stakeholders who want to get more into that detail. So what we're going to be asking of the consultation will be whether or not people recognise the kind of challenges and opportunities that are laid out at a high level in terms of for our region. We'll be asking them to comment on the objectives that we're setting in terms of the prioritisation for the transport needs in our area, and we'll be asking them to comment on the policies, so that kind of busy slide that was in the slide pack earlier. So it won't be getting into a tell me about your road type stuff. This is a strategic vision of over 15 years for the whole region. There will then be a suite of questions which come on to the kind of more bus-focused questions, because we want to get in early. We're developing the bus service improvement plan. It gives us an opportunity to get the early input on that. So there may be some more detailed questions on buses that we included, because we have this opportunity right now. But it'll be that high-level picture, broad brush, are we in the right ballpark? Are these the right kind of priorities to feed through into that more detailed consultation next year?
Thank you,
sorry, on the second question around cost, I need to come back to you to find out what's in there. I can't remember exactly what it included, but yeah, recognise the point that there are upfront costs with driving. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rolfe next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, well, so a few points and questions, but public consultation, how is that going to actually be undertaken? Is it online only? Are you going to be going out into communities? But also, don't forget district and boroughs, because generally speaking, we will have much better links into the local community to get that message out to help you push getting response back. But I agree with Councillor Mellon's point about what are we actually seeking as feedback? What meaningful input is the public going to have on this? I also am curious about that graph that Councillor Mellon pointed out, because that certainly would seem to suggest that our current structure of costs of public transport are by far hitting the most vulnerable in society far more than the most affluent in society, and that is the wrong way round. And then finally, you know, 15 years is a long time. A lot can change in 15 years, but what does success look like? Because we're talking in incredibly general terms, and I agree that we shouldn't set unrealistic targets, because that ultimately undermines faith in what we're doing here. But equally, I don't know what success is. You know, are we actually trying to plateau car miles? Are we trying to reduce them? You know, we're certainly not going to be carbon free in 15 years. And I think we should be trying to at least understand what we are trying to tangibly achieve, because then that gives us the mechanisms to make decisions about what things take us towards that target.
Thank you, Councillor Rolfe. Claire?
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the engagement activity, the plan for that will come to the next committee meeting, but it won't just, there will be the online opportunity, but we're also planning really quite involved in, engagement right across the community. So, for example, with approval, it might include things like the public exhibitions and local libraries right across the region. There'll be a mayoral launch, there'll be partner workshops with the stakeholders. There'll be all sorts of things. So we're also considering whether there might be focus groups to make sure we get that representative sample of voices from members of the public. So that's work is in development now. The idea is it will be more engaging than simply the online opportunity, although that will be there as well. And again, the answer in terms of what are we trying to get, it's not that detailed what you're doing on my road bit, it is that overarching. Do you agree with how we've set out the relative prioritisation of challenges and opportunities, and where we want to kind of, how we want to prioritise our efforts, if you like? That's the question that will be the main question, but they'll all be set out in a series of questionnaire. In terms of change over the next 15 years and what success looks like, yes, this document won't include targets or performance indicators, but the full transport plan will need to have targets and indicators included in there. That's part of what you need in a transport plan. So there's a huge amount of work which we need to do, and we're just getting started on that really to understand exactly the kind of questions you just asked. So if we were going to set a target for modal shift or traffic reduction or carbon reduction, what would that look like? Or, you know, service improvement, connectivity to employment by public transport, that kind of thing. So there's a whole range of, you know, there's a raft of things that we could do. There's a networks right across the country of transport professionals that share best practice on this kind of thing. So that's work we're beginning now, and we'll be able to bring that as part of the development work we do for the full transport plan to make sure we're measuring and tracking our success, because that's absolutely important to us as well.
Thanks, Claire. I've got Anthony next.
Thanks, Chair. I think for me, the little bit that I'd want to see is just that sort of bit of reality sort of grounding in a sense. So we know, for example, that sort of, you know, indications from the Mayor and in terms of sort of how it looks for our region, we're not going to be looking at bus franchising. So I think some clear statements around things that we're not going to be able to do in the, you know, at least in the short term, I think would be helpful in terms of being able to shape appropriate responses for what we can look at and what we can do. And I think, you know, for those areas where we know we're not necessarily going to be making that level of sort of significant change, just setting some of the ground rules around that, and for things that we're not looking at, because there's no point in encouraging responses sort of on an open format if we know there are areas where we're either not looking at that particular ambition, or we're not going to be looking at that particular process as an option as part of the transport planning. Thanks.
Thank you. Claire?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, albeit it's a short document, so I won't dive into too much detail on any particular mode. You know, we will set out a stall a bit on what bus improvements might look like, or how we're going to be approaching improvements. So, yeah, on that side of thing, I'm sure there'll be something about enhanced partnership rather than franchising. But I'd also say maybe at this stage of consultation, we're asking people, do you agree with where we're putting our efforts, and are there any gaps? Or so there might be people wanting things which aren't in our current toolbox, but I think that's part of the inviting people's views as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bingham.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the old question, strategic question, how do we get from here to there? I note that the current transport transition plan is partial. It excludes, for example, adult social care, home to school and SEND transport, and so it'd be interesting to know where that fits. I'll get to your question in a moment. So we're looking to link up, as well as improve existing transport and make it multimodal, is how do we get more flesh on the bones of the spatial strategy with the growth strategy zones? This committee is blind to what land is actually available. In other words, what are we connecting up more specifically, not in detail, and how are we connecting that up? That's it really, I suppose.
Thank you.
We're unsighted on the land side of things. We're unsighted as a committee on the land side of things, yeah.
Okay, so I can say kind of at officer level, we are liaising very closely with our spatial development colleagues, and we're meeting every week or 2 weeks to kind of bring that together, and they're kind of stepping up their work now on their spatial development strategy. I don't know if Edward wanted to say more about that from an overarching place directorate, but that work to integrate it is happening at that kind of officer level. I suppose if you want more information about it at a committee level, I don't know, I'm sure there's ways we could do that.
Just to reiterate the point that they're being developed hand in hand as much as we possibly can. The work to commence around the spatial development strategy is running slightly behind the work on the Mayor's Transport Plan, but they will be absolutely work together as we go forward hand in hand, and we can bring back relevant updates to the committee at any point really. We could do a presentation on the emerging spatial development plan next committee if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Swan.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's clear that years of lack of investment in our region has left us all with this huge legacy. We've already talked about the disconnect, the inability, your example today to try and get here, you know. And I don't think there's any quick win here. And I think we also need to manage the expectations. So when we are looking at consultation, that people will be looking at the example that you've raised today. Well, is that going to happen tomorrow? You know, because of the East Midlands Combined Authority. So I think when we do develop the consultation, that we understand strategically that this will be a long-term, to some extent, a long-term fix. There will be no quick fix to this particular problem. So I think how we manage those expectations is really important, because people will want some quick fixes across the region. So in terms of the focus of the consultation, are we focused on a 15-year plan, or are we focused on what people are seeing in the next 3 years, which is manageable to some extent? I don't know. But I think that's really, really important, because young people won't be thinking about 15 years' time. They'll want the here and now. Can I get to college? When is that going to change?
I'll come to Claire first, and then I've got Mayor.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? The consultation is really about that 15-year vision, so whether that's, I think it's a really helpful contribution, and whether there's some kind of wording we can put in there to be clear that, you know, things like light rail can take 10 years from idea to delivery on the ground, so just making sure that people are less close to transport understand that kind of size of the task, perhaps. Yeah, something for us to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important that in all of this process, people feel that there's a constant improvement towards an end point or an ambition of the kind of transport system that we're going to have in this region. And along that way, there will be things about better connectivity, improved fares, all of those things that I think will help people see that it's part of a joined up vision and plan for the longer term. And I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Bingham's points, which I'm not sure were picked up, that school travel, send travel and community will remain with the authority, the constituent councils, and do not transfer as part of the transport. There's no plans to take those.
Thank you, Mayor. no other questions or comments, can I have a show of hands on the recommendations in front of us, please, if you all approve them? Thank you. That's unanimous again.
Can I just make one point? I recognise that particularly for our colleagues in Nottingham, this has been quite a difficult journey this morning, and it's difficult when it's the other way round and when Councillor McEwen has to shift the other end, and that's the challenge that all of you are actually seeing about the transport system in this region, which is connecting parts of it are not easy. But I hope that people will bear with us as we continue to move these meetings around the region so that people understand those communities. And the second point I want to make is I know that there are people who have come today sitting in the public audience who wouldn't have come if it wasn't for the fact that we were here in Buxton. And I want to make sure that as many people as possible get to see the Combined Authority and its committees in action, and one of the ways in which we can do that, certainly for the foreseeable future until we have something that resembles a bit more of our own home in the region, is to be able to move our committees and boards around. And, you know, let's just mark the fact that we are in a very beautiful part of our region and an absolutely stunning place in Buxton and this particular room itself. So take a moment to look up and just appreciate it as one of the gems of the East Midlands region.
Thank you, Mayor Clare. But I'd just like to thank everybody again. To say, myself and Councillor Bingham had a beautiful journey up here, apart from potholes, but we did have a lovely journey here. But we're working on that. Thank you, everybody.
No, you're right, it does demonstrate the point.